All right, we are now into July, which means it has been over 2 months since Gray Zone Warfare launched into early access. I can't believe that it's already been that long, but I wanted to do a little catch up, give you guys my thoughts on the current state of the game and how they've been doing over the past 60 days. So if you guys are down for that, leave a like on the video, subscribe for more tactical FPS content. Let's get into it. So to say the game launched in a solid state would be, a bit of a stretch. From performance to faction locking to a whole myriad of issues, everyone jumped in and I think could see the potential, but there were a lot of things that people were expecting to be there that just weren't. Now, since that launch, the developers dropped a series of hotfixes within the first week that tackled issues like players sometimes spawning without heads, clothes, or secure containers. They were fixing issues with anti-cheat, preventing players from joining servers, as well as giving the players options to wipe their characters and choose a different faction so they could actually choose to play with their friends. The first big patch would come 3 weeks into this 60-day, series, addressing over 200 issues that players had reported already, followed up by a couple of hotfixes, the second of which actually had to be rolled back at the time due to a myriad of performance issues causing games to crash, CPU spikes, and massive frame rate issues. 2 weeks ago, the developers announced that patch number 2 has now entered public playtesting on their brand new experimental branch. It was then announced on June 28th, just last week, that the final push for testing of patch 2 is happening right now, meaning this patch is most likely going to go public any day now, hopefully. Now, I want to shift gears and talk about the community itself before we get into where the game is actually at in terms of, gameplay and performance. 30 days into early access, the developers announced that they sold over 900,000 copies of the game, which is just insane for an indie title like this. Most likely at this point, the game has sold over 1 million copies, which is a huge W for the team. Now, the game launched to mixed reviews on Steam, and even looking at the most recent reviews, it's still sitting in that same kind of mixed area with an overall score of around 66%. Now, what's even more interesting is the player numbers. So obviously the peak happened within that first week with around 72,000 players jumping in all at the same time. So from peak to peak since launch, the player base has dropped around 82%. The game has lost around 80% of its average daily players, which in terms of a healthy community, it's not a great sign. A game that thrives on, community numbers and testing and just kind of general involvement can't be looking around and feeling confident with a drop like that. With that said, though, this is also kind of par for the course for a lot of video games nowadays. And honestly, at one point, for me, it was a cause for alarm, maybe 5 years ago if we saw these kind of numbers. But seeing how gamers are nowadays, they consume, and then it's on to the next thing. And if there's not enough content to keep you hooked, if there's issues at launch that you kind of have to wait and kind of work through, they're going to move on to the next thing or move back to a game that they know is performant and has enough content to keep them on the hook. It's actually very rare in this industry to hold your player numbers consistently month in and month out, let alone years like some of these other games are doing. It's why when I talk about games like Rainbow Six or even Call of Duty, supporting long-term visions and actually being able to have a bustling player base. Hell, games like Counter-Strike, PUBG, Fortnite, Valorant, they're all like shining examples of games that can break that norm and keep people playing their games long term. It's an anomaly to be able to do that. So when we talk about those kind of games, like, it's something to celebrate. Now, with all of that said, I think we jump into the meat and potatoes of today's video. I tried Gray Zone Warfare for the first time in probably about a month yesterday. I jumped in. I was sitting here as a player waiting for things to get better in terms of both performance, optimization, as well as hopefully we can get a little bit of content coming in to start bringing these player numbers back. With that said, holy shit, was that a terrible experience. And when I say terrible, I mean that playing on public servers as of right now, July 2nd, it's almost unplayable, at least for me and my build and whatever. A 4080, 64 gigs of RAM, a 12900K, It was stutter butter central. Rubber banding, stuttering, the performance was terrible. I would say for the vast majority of players, it is an unplayable experience. I went and I did one mission, and by the end of it, I just said, fuck it. Like, this isn't even enjoyable in the slightest. Here's the thing though, even while I was playing, still, I can see the potential in a game like this. You know, I'm playing through it. The visuals still look great, even though I am rubber banding and lagging around. The gunplay, when you do get into fights, is cool. There's just still such a long way to go, which, I mean, obviously it's early access, right? But for me, I was surprised to see that the performance has actually gone down significantly from launch. I remember playing the alpha and then going into early access. I was like, yeah, it's definitely unoptimized, but my build was able to kind of power through it. Now, even playing on the new experimental, like, patch 2, it's still really, really bad in terms of micro stuttering. As soon as you get into the city of Namthaven, my performance absolutely tanks. You guys are seeing it on screen here. This is gameplay from today on patch 2, testing on the experimental branch. I'm not sure what it's going to take to get this game to a point where it is actually optimized. It's probably a multitude of things, honestly. Like, it's probably something to do with the servers, as well as something to do with optimization of some of these textures, as well as, you know, a multitude of other things just stacked on top of one another. And that's what the experimental branch is for, I guess. It definitely is disappointing that I have seen just a massive performance dip, even more so than what we saw at launch. So in terms of like a report card report for Gray Zone Warfare 60 days in, you know, it's still the same game. I don't believe there's been any updates in terms of like content, new, you know, lootable items or anything like that. It has been a sole focus on obviously performance and optimization, and they still have a really long way to go with that. I've seen a complete step backwards here, and I'm not quite sure when we're going to see that first step forward. I have no idea. That is the point of early access, is going through these situations. But when you see a game that costs this much money, while also taking jabs at other games that were messing up at the time, i.e. Escape from Tarkov and their $250 Unheard edition, that was around the time that Gray Zone Warfare was launching. Their social media managers were kind of taking some shots, and now we're 60 days in, and the game is functionally unplayable for a large portion of their player base still. It's unfortunate. I'm hoping that by hopefully the end of the year, we can see this game actually come to a point where I can jump in and have a good time. And that's the thing. I've seen other YouTubers who are playing this game and they're going through like hardcore runs. They're soloing things. They're beating the game. They're completing every quest. So I think the line for like playability is definitely different for a lot of people. But for me personally, like, I'm not playing a game that runs and looks and feels as bad as Gray Zone Warfare does in its current state. I'll be sure to keep up with future updates on this game because I do want to see it succeed, and I do want to see it get to a point where I can actually enjoy it. It's just not at that point right now. Patch 2 is coming out soon, which brings in 9 more LZs added to the map. Pickup and destination are displayed in heli details, so you now know where helicopters are running, so you can maybe hitch a ride with a solo player that called one in. There is a new setting for mouse sensitivity in ADS, as well as a multitude of AI issues and, you know, dead bodies getting stuck falling through floors, a myriad of actual bug fixes in this as well. It's in final testing right now, so if you want to jump onto the public experimental branch, you could do so, test it for yourself. But if not, just wait. It should be, you know, any day now. My name is BigFry. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think of Gray Zone Warfare. And while you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe for more content just like this, and I'll see you on the next one.